Jack Links presents The Greatest Duo. There's nothing like a great duo. 2 flavors, 1 bag. New Jack Links Duos.
Welcome back to the PFF NFL show. Trevor, Sikkema, and Dalton Wasserman here with you guys. Another episode, another round of draft grades that we have here. Today we're talking about the AFC and NFC East. So we got 8 more teams. We're going to go through every single pick from their draft hauls in the 2025 NFL Draft. Tell you what PFF thinks of them. We're going to give you the PFF staff grade, and then we'll talk about us ourselves. Do we think it's a little bit higher, a little bit lower, or do we think it's just spot on? Dalton, how you doing, my friend?
Good. I'm excited for this one. Honestly, this group of teams, there was a lot of good classes in here, weren't there, Trevor? It doesn't feel like we're going to have a whole lot of bad to say because I think a lot of these teams did a really nice job. Obviously, a couple of them are still kind of rebuilding and figure out how to get into postseason contention, but I think we got a lot of fun classes to talk about here.
Yeah, you sat down, and right before we hit record, you were like, all right, we got some great classes that we're talking about today. And I agree. There's a lot of teams that really helped themselves out and some ones that had some big additions that we'll see this year and beyond. Before we get into all of that, if you guys haven't yet and you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, now is the time to get it. Promo code DRAFT25 that gives you 25% off. So go check that out over at subscribe.pff.com. And gives you basically everything. If you haven't had a PFF Plus subscription before, I mean, it's the best. It gives you all the premium stats that we talk about here on this show, but so much more. It'll give you the fully unlocked mock draft simulator, the draft guide. It'll give you the fantasy football tools during fantasy football season. We're unleashing some new betting tools this year that we are very, very excited about. So if gambling is your thing here in the sports world, we got you there as well. But don't waste any time. Don't wait to get a subscription. Get 25% off right now using that promo code DRAFT25. So that's the best way to do it. Subscribe.pff.com. Okay, Dalton, let's dig into this first draft class that we have here. AFC East. Let's start with the Buffalo Bills. The first round, they took cornerback Maxwell Harrison. Second round, defensive tackle TJ Sanders. Third round, Landon Jackson. Fourth round, Deon Walker. Fifth round, a pair of fifth-round selections, Jordan Hancock and Jackson Hawes. In the sixth round, we had 2 more picks, Dorian Strong and Chase Lunt. And then they rounded it out with Maryland wide receiver Caden Prather. PFF staff gave this one an A-, so high praise here for the Buffalo Bills. What do you give this draft?
Honestly, for me, I think this would be a solid A. I don't even really see a reason to give it an A- because I think Carolina is my favorite draft class in the league. I think Buffalo might be second, and I think it's just the mentality of them going, okay, look, we need to fix this defense. And I know their general manager, Brandon Beane, kind of got in a tussle with some radio hosts earlier in the week, and they were asking, why didn't you draft a wide receiver earlier? And he's like, listen, it's this defense. I have to fix this defense or we won't go anywhere. And I completely agree. And honestly, I love just about every pick they made. Maxwell Harrison, I wasn't entirely sure he would be a first-round guy. He kind of needed that scheme fit, a really heavy zone defense. I think he went to the right place. I think TJ Sanders gives you a lot as a pass rusher, especially rotationally early on. Landon Jackson was a great value in the third round. Deon Walker in the fourth might be a home run swing, but I think in the fourth round it's worthy of the swing that you're taking on his talent, considering especially what we saw in 2023. Jordan Hancock, Dorian Strong also in the secondary. Even offensively, I love Jackson Hawes at tight end as a third blocking tight end, especially with a team that really wants to have balance and run the football. I know a lot they go with 6 offensive linemen, but you could probably use Jackson Hawes in that role instead of a 6 offensive lineman, and then he gives you at least a little bit more as a receiver. So, Trev, I absolutely love this draft. This is one of my favorite draft classes. I think the Bills finally got it right with just going, you know what, throw talent at this defense, start throwing darts at this defense, because that's really where the gap is. I believe they were a bottom 5 lowest graded defense in the league last year, and that's the reason. Every time they get in big spots in the postseason, especially against Kansas City, they just can't make stops when they need to. So throwing this much talent at it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, I like their approach in this draft. I would give it an A-, and I would give it an A- because when it came to them picking Maxwell Harrison at the back end of the first round, clearly they liked Maxwell Harrison a lot. And Maxwell could be fantastic. I'm not saying that he can't. I would have rather had Trey Amos, Benjamin Morrison, Savone Ravel. Like those guys were all still on the board at that point in time. I know Revel, excuse me. I know that he was coming off the knee injury, so there's a little bit of a concern there. But I would have had those three guys over Maxwell Harrison, and so taking him over those corners at number 30, a little bit of a preference difference there. And then Deon Walker, fourth round is totally fine. Still quite a bit higher of where he was drafted versus where I had him on my big board. I probably would have preferred a different defensive tackle there at that point, but you can't teach the unique size and length that he has. So that's them making the bet on Deon Walker is totally fine. Now, when it comes to their other selections, love TJ Sanders in the spot. I already think the Buffalo Bills do a really great job putting all of their defensive linemen in one gap attacking situations, whether it's Ed Oliver, whether it's Greg Rousseau, like whoever it is. They do a great job of putting these guys in situations where they're just attacking the pocket. And that's exactly what TJ Sanders does really, really well. I love the Landon Jackson addition too, because Landon Jackson to me just feels like a higher ceiling, more athletic version of what they wanted out of AJ Epinesa when they drafted him many years ago. And instead now you just sort of reset that with a rookie contract. So for Jackson to be there in the third, I thought that was an absolute steal for the Buffalo Bills. Jordan Hancock, I think, really goes in line to what they like from their safeties. These guys who could play not only on the back end, but also in the slot as well. Jordan Hancock played a lot in the slot for Ohio State. I think he brings you some long arms, some good length, some good size to being able to defend the slot and just be called that nickel defender. So I like that there. Jackson Hawes, depth at the tight end position, one of the best blocking tight ends that we have in the class. So I like a lot of that. And then, the clip of Brandon Beane, you're getting a little bowing up on the radio host, I should say, when he's sort of challenging them for not taking a wide receiver. I even like the wide receiver that they took. I like Caden Prather. There were times when I liked Caden Prather better than Ty Felton, and Ty Felton was drafted a lot higher and was just regarded a lot higher around the NFL. But Prather, to me, is built more like an NFL wide receiver, and he at least gives you that plus size to be able to play on the line of scrimmage as an X. So I think the reason why I wouldn't give this one a straight A is just preference of, okay, I'd rather have a different defensive tackle than Deon Walker when they took him in the fourth, and I would have rather had a different corner from where they took Maxwell Harrison at the back of the first. But I love the strategy here. I love how they implemented what they wanted to out of this draft class and when they were on the clock. So I thought it was a great job by Brandon Beane.
No, for sure. I think this is just where they have to make up the gap, right, with Kansas City, and that's a team that's able to make stops. Baltimore, for the most part, is a team when they need to, they can make stops, right? So I think the Bills, if they can, even if they just have, call it an average defense with Josh Allen running the show offensively, they can win the whole thing at that point. So if they get even just that level of improvement from where they were last year, especially in coverage, I think this is a team we still look at as a prime Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, I couldn't remember exactly which defensive tackles were on the board. I remember there were a handful that I preferred to Deon Walker, but Ty Robinson, who was picked very shortly after Deon Walker, I had him ranked higher. CJ West, certainly. Josh Farmer, sort of a toss-up there, but like Cam Jackson, another one who, like, if you wanted the length for what you wanted out of that player, I like Cam Jackson more than I like Deon Walker. So, again, just a handful of guys I would have rather had there, but a job well done by the Buffalo Bills once again. New England Patriots. This is one of my favorite draft classes, and it's a long one. At the very top, they took offensive tackle Will Campbell at number 4 overall. Then in the second round, they got a little bit more dynamic in the running back room with Travion Henderson from Ohio State. Continued that addition of athleticism with Kyle Williams in the third. Also, Jared Wilson, the center from Georgia, in the third. Pair of fourth-round picks in Craig Woodson and Joshua Farmer. Fifth round, they got Braden Swinson, who genuinely could be the steal of the draft. I really do think that. From where he was on my board, he was picked about 100 spots later than where I had him ranked in the 40s on my big board. That's an absolute steal for talent, in my opinion. Andreas Borregales, the kicker, in the 6th. And then in the 7th round, a handful of picks. Marcus Bryant, Julian Ashby, and Kobe Minor there. The staff gave the Patriots an A. This was one of my 2 A pluses that I gave out on the NFL Stock Exchange show. It was them and the Carolina Panthers. And so very clearly, I loved what the Patriots did. And really what puts a draft class over the top, in my opinion, and what gives them that plus next to that A is when I can look at this whole offseason and see that it was a job well done, that it was a strategy that was well implemented. And with the Patriots, going into this offseason with the change at head coach, bringing in Mike Vrabel and moving on from Gerard Mayo, this was the worst roster in the NFL on paper. They had a tall task ahead of them, really turning around this roster. Now, you had Drake May, so you had the most important part in hand, but it was going to take a lot of work, and they attacked defense hard in free agency with a ton of cap space to be able to do it. Got a lot of difference-making players on that defensive side of the ball. And then in the draft, I thought it was a great mix of prioritizing offensive guys, but then also not being afraid to add some defensive players a little bit later in the draft too. So to me, this gets an A+ because not only did I love the draft haul, I thought it was an incredible compliment to what they had already done in the offseason. And this Patriots team already looks light years better on paper than what it was last season.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we could look back 3 years from now and go, okay, why are the Patriots good? It would be because of this draft class and how they surrounded Drake May with talent in this draft class. You want a starting left tackle? You got it in Will Campbell. Travion Henderson brings an element of speed that was not in their backfield last year. Kyle Williams brings an element of speed that was not in their receiving core last year. I think one of the themes of New England's offense outside of, well, they just couldn't block anybody was they had no speed whatsoever. Drake May is a vertical passer. You want to be able to make explosive plays in the passing game. Obviously, Henderson can do it as a runner and as a receiver. Williams is a really good deep threat. And then Jared Wilson, look, I see no reason, even as a third-round pick, that he couldn't compete with Garrett Bradbury for the starting center job. I know starting two rookies on the offensive line is always risky, but I think he's talented enough to do so. We haven't seen much from Bradbury in Minnesota that suggests, okay, this guy should be a slam dunk fit to start, right away in New England. So I think those first four players are going to be the real key here for this team. Obviously, you're trying to surround Drake May with talent. We were wondering what the strategy was when they didn't do it much in free agency, but I think you really have a situation here where now they have enough talent, they have enough speed. Obviously, adding Stephon Diggs as well. You still have some other guys who were pretty good last year, Pop Douglas, some veteran tight ends. I think this is a team you could envision if this draft hits pretty soon here. You could envision them being in second place in this division. They've added a ton of talent. Miami, it seems like, is only losing talent little by little every year. I don't know if their record would be enough to get them into wild card consideration, and the AFC is still absolutely loaded, but I could see them finishing this year in second place, especially if this draft class develops right.
I agree with you 100%. I think that it's the Bills' division to lose once again, but I would be picking the Patriots to finish second right now. I'm intrigued by the Jets, but just a lot of turnover there with the Jets. It's going to be a little bit of a learning curve with them. Obviously, you're getting a new quarterback in there as well. So just some different changes and philosophical views with some guys who are already on the roster with the new regime that is there. I understand that that's also the case with the Patriots, but they didn't have as much turnover as the Patriots did, and they have the quarterback still there and familiar with a lot of the players that do remain there in New England. So I would agree with you. I think that the Patriots are all of a sudden the second team to beat in that division. I agree with you. I think that it's I don't know, unlikely it feels like that they'd make a wild card spot in the AFC, but I think that they will be a much tougher out than they were the previous season. I see Will Campbell as a left tackle. I don't think they draft him at number 4 overall if they don't think that he could play left tackle, so I think he's sliding into one of those spots. I think that Jared Wilson, I agree with you, can be a starter soon. And the thing that I like a lot about Kyle Williams is I think he's going to be this team's wide receiver 2 for the long haul. Now, will he maybe be a wide receiver 1 for them this upcoming year? Perhaps. I still think that they would like for one of those guys who was in the building last year to be able to step up, and Jalen Polk and Jerome Baker and Pop Douglas, like you mentioned. But I think Kyle Williams is probably the long-term wide receiver 2 on this team, and they can sort of wait to make a major splash at wide receiver over the next 2 seasons as Drake May continues to develop. Had somebody in the chat, I believe it was Travis in the chat, said Swinson can't set the edge or stop the run. The thing about the Swinson pick, though, is that, yeah, okay, he's not as strong against the run, and I agree with you there. He had a 69.6 run defense grade this past season, but even as just a designated pass rusher, 22.1% pass rush win percentage this past year, 91.4% pass rushing grade against true pass sets. Even as a DPR, he's a steal in the 5th round. I would have told you that even if you were only thinking about Braden Swinson as just a pass rusher, that's a 3rd-round player, in my opinion. For how well he was able to get into the backfield, get past offensive tackles, win cleanly, that to me was a top 100 pick all day long. And so to me, even if that's just what you think that he is, I still think that he could be the steal of the draft because he was drafted about a round, maybe even 2 lower than he should have been. So any thoughts on Swinson there? Again, I just have such high hopes for him. I think he's going to be great in New England.
No, I think you make the right point. Look, if you want guys to stop the run, you have Harold Landry, you have Keon White, you have Anthony Jennings, you have Kayvon Chason. You've got a bunch of veteran guys who you can put in there to stop the run, and Braden Swinson can play 20 snaps a game as a pass rusher. You're absolutely right. In the 5th and 6th round, on day 3 really is when you're trying to find role players. I think that's an excellent role player to have.
Yep, I agree with you. All right, we're going to move on to your New York Jets here in a second. But before we do that, got to talk to all the parents out there and just ask them what their child's future success looks like for them. Think about it. Maybe it's your kids being able to travel the world. Maybe it's them owning their own business, just owning their own house, just living a very comfortable life. Whatever that looks like, you can help them achieve that right now with a kids investment account from Fabric by Gerber Life. Fabric by Gerber Life, it was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a kids investment account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. It all starts with just $20. There's no contribution limits to it. It's tax advantages. Funds are SIPC, insure up to $500,000. There's no commission fees to it, just a low flat monthly maintenance fee. It's all online, very easy to set up. Could take you as little as just 5 minutes. Your kids can't invest while they're minors, but you can invest on their behalf. Gives their investments much more time to grow. And you don't have to wait all the way until they're adults to use this investment. When they're kids, it's just sort of a fun to be able to tap into for music classes, sports, tutors, tuition, things like that. And then when they're older, maybe it is helping them, take that trip or own their own business or buy their first house, whatever that looks like. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child's future today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL, MEET, fabric.com/PFFNFL. The portfolios are managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Learn more at meetfabric.com. All right, let's go to the Jets next. Curious is what you think about the Jets class here. First round, we got offensive tackle Armand Membou. Second round, tight end Mason Taylor. Third round is Arie Thomas. Fourth round, Arian Smith, the wide receiver out of Georgia. In the fourth round as well, safety Malachi Moore. Fifth round, Francis Mauga, the linebacker from Miami, and then another Miami player, Tyler Barron, the edge rusher there in the fifth round. Our staff gave the Jets a B+ here. Now, as our resident Jets expert, you a little bit harsher on this because it is your team, or are you giving it a B+ as well?
No, I mean, a B or a B+ is fine. I think the one pick that I would take umbrage with is probably Arian Smith in the fourth round when you had guys like Alec Iamaner and Jalen Royals and Torrey Horton still on the board. I wasn't sure Smith would be drafted. I think his receiving grade this year was around a 57. He had a lot of drops at Georgia. I know he's got the 4.3 speed, but it was a very inconsistent tape and only 1 year as a starter. But this draft is really about these first 3 picks, and I think the theme here is the long-term approach and the youth that they got, right? All 3 of their first 3 picks, Membou, Taylor, and Thomas, they're all going to be 21 years old this season. I think the Jets are very much taking a long-term approach under this new regime. I don't think they're going to win a whole lot of games in 2025, and they didn't make a whole lot of, I think, win-right-now picks to win a ton of games in 2025. The idea behind an offensive lineman, a new tight end, and even a corner who's probably not going to start over Brandon Stevens with the contract that he just got. He's really going to be their third outside corner. They're just trying to develop guys, right? They're going to put Taylor in the fire, right away as probably the starting tight end. Membou's going to start at right tackle, and they're just going to get these guys reps, okay? This is not going to be so much this year about winning games. You've got kind of a Band-Aid quarterback unless he really emerges, to another level in Justin Fields than we've seen before. They're trying to, Aaron Glenn, just like this reminds me a lot of Dan Campbell's first year in Detroit. The wins and losses really don't matter. They're trying to reset the culture. They're trying to set the tone that maybe they get more aggressive in next year's draft, right? Maybe a new franchise quarterback, maybe some other things that could help them in the more immediate future. But I think this really is a draft for the future. You talk about a young offensive line. You talk about maybe eventually pairing Thomas with Sauce Gardner as the starting corners in the secondary when he gets a little bit older. Hopefully Mason Taylor can develop into a top 10 to 12 tight end, but he needs a year or two to continue to develop his skills. So I do like some of the depth they got here, especially Malachi Moore in the 5th round, but this is about a youth movement. This is about resetting the culture in New York. I don't think this is not a draft aimed at winning a bunch of games in 2025. That's not what it's going to be about. They're trying to find the keepers for this roster.
Yeah, I'm with you. There's really only 2 players who I think are surefire starters, and that's Armand Membou and Mason Taylor. And even Mason Taylor, in some situations in the NFL, he might not be a starter his very first year, but the Jets, I think, need him to be, so they will lean on him quite a bit in the passing game. Azareye'h Thomas, with Sauce Gardner already there, with the signing of Brandon Stevens, it feels as though he's not going to be thrust in that starting lineup. I do think that he is going to be an Aaron Glenn disciple, though. I think that the way he wants to play the cornerback position is the way that Aaron Glenn played the cornerback position, just wants to be aggressive, wants to get hands on guys, wants to play him in press coverage, and I think that the Jets want to lean into that a little bit more, and so they're trying to get the horses to be able to run that race, if you will. The rest of the guys, Arian Smith was extremely puzzling to me. I agree. It was a little reminiscent of sort of the way that I talked about the San Francisco 49ers draft class, where I look at this and I go, okay, even if you liked this player, you could have had them 2 rounds later than where you ended up picking him. I fully believe that the Jets could have picked Arian Smith in the 6th round. And so that was a little bit puzzling to me. Part of being good at the draft is understanding the intel of the rest of the teams. And I will be fair to a brand new regime who's taking over as the primary decision makers for the first time in New York. And a little bit of a learning curve maybe in that regard. And so I'll give them a little bit of grace there, but I think that was quite an overdraft for me. I think Malachi Moore is a good player. I think this is more of a culture pick than maybe necessarily a guy who's going to make a big impact. And then the 2 guys from Miami, I think, are just sort of depth players there. So to me, you got to hope that the players who were drafted, I would say like 3rd round and beyond, those are the big culture-changing guys for you. You want the guys at the very top. And I'll throw Azareye'h Thomas's name in there as one that you want to be productive and a big part of what you're going to do moving forward. But you're hoping that these selections that you made, especially on day 3, they're really going to help the health, the culture, the vision, the character of this team moving forward. And maybe that will be worth it in the end, regardless of maybe where these guys got drafted.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think at the end of the day, we're going to be looking at those first 2 picks especially very, very hard throughout this season, right? When you talk about Membou, who's going to start at right tackle, and Membou and Fashanu could be one of the better tackle pairs in the league pretty soon, and they're both incredibly young. And then Mason Taylor in a tight end room that's really bare, especially for receiving threats. And with Justin Fields, we know he likes to throw to tight ends. He could have a big rookie year if everything develops right, but he's going to be put through the fire early.
Let's go to the Dolphins next. You touched on the Dolphins as, that team that was sort of the de facto second team in the division, but one that's, I feel like lost his grip, at least from a prediction side of things of what we think is going to happen this upcoming season. In the 1st round, the Miami Dolphins went defensive tackle Kenneth Grant. A lot of options there for them at number 13, but they ended up going with Grant there. Jonas Savaiinaea, the offensive lineman from Arizona, they traded up, I believe, to go get him. 5th round, Jordan Phillips, Jason Marshall Jr., Dante Trader Jr. as well, so some secondary additions, and then staying along the defensive trenches too. 6th round, they took running back Ollie Gordon, and then in the 7th round, quarterback Quinn Ewers and defensive tackle Zeke Biggers. What an interesting quarterback group they have now with Quinn Ewers, Tua Tagovailoa, and Zach Wilson. Our staff gave the Dolphins a B here. Dalton, what do you think about this grade?
I'm in between. I might go a little bit lower. I get what they're trying to do with Grant and obviously Jordan Phillips because they lost Calais Campbell, who was by far their best run defender up front. So you're trying to replace that with younger run defenders, and I think Grant and Phillips can fill that role for sure. So I think the run defense is going to be okay. We know Grant is a big dude who's an underrated athlete. Trading up for Savaiinaea is going to be the next most interesting one. And, I think we expect if they traded up to 37 to get him in the second round that they're hoping he's going to start at that left guard guard spot over Liam Eichenberg. And the funny part with Savaiane, I know he's got flexibility. He can probably do it. Played almost 1,000 snaps at right guard in his career at Arizona. Not a single one at left guard. He never played there before. So now you're asking a guy who you traded up for is going to be a lot of pressure, especially when it comes to protecting Tua. We know that's a premium on this team with all his injuries. Now you're asking him to play a position he's never played. Should it be that big of an adjustment? Probably not, because his footwork in pass protection plays up pretty much anywhere that he's played. So those are going to be the two key guys. I mean, the first two guys, the only two guys you got in the first 4 rounds of this draft, Grant and Savaiane. This team had to get better in the trenches. I think in theory they did with these couple of picks plus Jordan Phillips. Where I'm worried now is just this secondary. And maybe it's a situation just like Jair Alexander in Green Bay where they're starting to maybe trying to patch things up and Jalen Ramsey's going to stay. But even then, they were in the bottom 7 in coverage grade last year, even with Jalen Ramsey, with Javon Holland, with Kendall Fuller, and they didn't add a whole lot. Jason Marshall's a good athlete who, I think just made a lot of mental errors. That was kind of a theme with your Gators secondary down there the last couple of years. Dontre Trader's a good athlete. I don't know that he's an impact player beyond special teams right now. So this secondary is where I worry the most. Look, if Savaiane can come in and be a starting left guard, then cool. If Grant can make an impact in run defense, cool. It's a decent draft. That's just a part of this team, the back 7 of their defense and coverage, that I would really worry about.
Yeah, I will shout this out because you were saying that Jonah has not played on the left side of things. James Daniels, who they signed at free agency, has. He played left guard for the first 3 years of his college career, or his NFL career, when he was with the Chicago Bears, and had some of his better years when he was at left guard, actually, at that spot. So in theory, they could be just playing James Daniels at left guard, and they can allow Jonah to stay on the right side of the line of scrimmage. So I just wanted to shout that out there. But, I look at this draft, and it's hard to be over the moon with this draft because I think that there are things that the Miami Dolphins did well, but there are still major holes on their roster. Specifically, if they trade Jalen Ramsey, it's going to look pretty ugly in that secondary. Now, the thing that I would say is that this roster already wasn't very alluring going into the draft, and we knew that they were not going to be able to fill all those holes with impact players from this draft class. And so even though when I still look at the Dolphins roster, I go, yeah, okay, it's better. And I want to sort of take that out on the draft grade because I wish they would have done more. I kind of like how they prioritize it, right? Defensive line, because they absolutely needed to get a lot better up front. Jordan Phillips and Kenneth Grant, no question about it, make you better along the defensive line. And then fill in one of their major holes that they have in the interior offensive line with Big Jonah playing either left guard or right guard. So, to me, it's hard for me to give it less of a B. I'm not as enthusiastic but I think that's more of I'm a little bit apathetic about just what I think of the Miami Dolphins overall. I just don't have a lot of faith that they're going to be anything better than even the good version of Miami that we have seen in the past. And even that, I think, is probably best case scenario. I don't think that this team is in a situation where they're going to overperform what they have been in the past, overperform expectations in a large way, and be a wild card team that's actually going to make a lot of noise and get past the first round and make a deep playoff run. Like, I just don't see that from this team. So it is still a solid draft, though. I don't want to be too overly negative just because I've been disappointed about how that roster has been depleted over the years. I don't want to take that out on their draft class, which honestly I feel like was a good one, given the fact that they had major trench needs. They emphasize both of those things, and they'll attack skill position players, I think, over the next year or two.
No, yeah, I mean, and actually that's a good call you made there on Daniel. So maybe Jonah does stay on the right side. And that either way, and Daniel's still coming off a torn Achilles, they just have to get better in pass protection, and Jonah should be able to help them with that. And I think he fits this system better than it would be if he went to a power, a gap scheme sort of system. So I think that is a good call out. Maybe he starts on the right side and Daniel's on the left. But you're right, this is a team that had to get better in the trenches, and that's the priority they went with.
Any thoughts on either Quinn Ewers or Ollie Gordon? I think if you would have said to any college football fan that one team was going to get Ollie Gordon and Quinn Ewers in the 6th and 7th rounds of the NFL draft, if you would have said that to them 2 years ago, they would have said that you have absolutely no idea what you're talking about, and quite frankly, you don't know ball. But that's exactly what happened here after 2 seasons that were lower than the expectations that we had for both of those guys. Quinn's interesting. I think that he's basically the Zach Wilson bet that you made, except for he's going to be there for a much longer period of time because he's under the rookie contract. And then, to be honest, like, I don't know if I hate Ollie Gordon in this wide zone rushing scheme, because at least it allows him to not have to stop and start and accelerate, where I felt like he really lacked the agility that was needed to force missed tackles in between the offensive tackles, in between the trenches, in more of a power run blocking concept. And at least I think that if you get his momentum going one direction and all you require from him is just one cut and get up the field, maybe he could just sort of be a momentum back. So that's my thoughts on it. I actually don't hate the landing spot for Ollie Gordon, even though that I figure that he'd probably be somewhere around a mid-day 3 pick.
Well, I think the problem is if you watch the 2023 tape, it fits perfectly. But I'm pretty sure also that year he was listed at about 210 or 211, somewhere in there, and he looked like he was blazing fast when he got in the open field. Now he comes in measuring 226 and ran a 4.61 40. It's actually funny because that's not usually the type of back that Miami's drafting, right? They're always pretty much at running back, drafting 40-time Devon Achane, Jalen Wright, obviously two of the fastest backs in their class. Ollie Gordon, at least in his current state, is the opposite. So I wonder if they try to take that weight back off of him and try to get that speed back that he had in 2023. And then I think Ewers, if there was a place where he could develop as the third quarterback behind Tua and Wilson and really fit in a system, it's here. Because just like Texas, heavy RPO, heavy play action, throwing to your first read a lot. I think it is something he could get comfortable with under Mike McDaniel. The bootleg game also something that was pretty prevalent in Texas that he's comfortable with. So I think it's a system he would be comfortable with. He can sit back as the third guy. If he plays well enough, maybe he can fight Zach Wilson for that backup job. But you have him around. You obviously get him on the 4-year contract that comes with a draft pick and see where that goes. It is a system that fits him reasonably well, and they felt the need, take the chance on the 7th rounder and see if you can develop him.
Let's move on to the NFC East. Let's talk about the New York Giants first. In the first round, they took edge rusher Abdul Carter. Didn't really overthink that one. And then later in the first round, they traded up from their early second-round selection up to number 25 overall to draft Ole Miss quarterback Jackson Dart. Third round, Darius Alexander, the defensive lineman from Toledo. Fourth round, Cam Scadaboo, the running back from Arizona State. Fifth round, Marcus Bowe, the offensive tackle from Purdue. And then in the 7th round, Thomas Fidone, the tight end from Nebraska, and then Corey Black, the corner from Oklahoma State, excuse me. Our staff gave this one an A-. What do you think about this one, Dalton?
I think our staff we're kind of hedging a little bit, because I think the opinions on Jackson Dart are so divisive that if you like Dart and you like the fact that they traded up for him, you probably give it an A or an A+. And if you're not a huge fan of Dart, then maybe this goes down to a B or a B+, right? I think, and that's kind of representative of how this class is going to go. Look, Abdul Carter is going to be good. He's a freak of nature. There's a reason the Micah Parsons comps are out there. I really like the Darius Alexander pick to get another run stopper next to Dexter Lawrence. I think Cam Scadaboo could start for them at running back very, very soon. Marcus Bowe is a good developmental O-lineman to have. It just comes down to the variance of Dart and whether or not he can be the franchise quarterback, and we're not going to know that for 2, if not 3 years, right? And this year they're hoping he can sit behind Russell Wilson. Russ can start week 1. You don't have to rush Dart in there while he learns how to play under center, while he learns how to play in an NFL offense, because what he ran at Ole Miss was just not an NFL offense. It was no huddle. They were chucking the ball downfield. He had almost a 12-yard average depth of target, which just does not fly in the NFL, right? So I think there's a lot for him to learn. Even at the Senior Bowl, it felt like he was uncomfortable taking snaps under center. So there's some development to be had there with Jackson Dart. I think it's still smart to start Russell Wilson week 1 and let Dart sit and watch and get the footwork and everything he needs to get going in Brian Daboll's offense. And I think that's really, aside from Carter, that's how a lot of people are going to judge this Giants draft, is the success of Jackson Dart and whether or not Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen pretty much saved their jobs by making that trade.
Yeah, I do like all these selections. The Dart one is obviously a risk. I'm not as big of a fan of Jackson Dart going to the NFL as others are. He was ranked below 100 on my big board. I saw him as more of an early 4th-round pick, understanding that quarterback normally gets a bump. Anywhere from like the 3rd round, I would have been okay with. Early 3rd round, I would have understood. Late 1st round is rich for me, but again, it's the bet that you kind of have to take. And I've said this before throughout the offseason. I kind of feel bad for the Giants. I do. And I understand that they're the ones who put them in this situation, but by all accounts, they were in on the Matthew Stafford market. they probably reached out about Geno Smith. They tried to get these other. I'm sure that they were, gauging the interest of Sam Darnold, and he probably didn't want to go to New York. So instead, they signed Russell Wilson, they signed Jameis Winston, and now they're trying to make a splash at quarterback. They also, we were told that people were trying to trade up to number 1 overall with the Titans, and that the Giants, I think, were one of those teams that were in the mix to do that. So they have tried. They really have. And so I don't want to knock them too much because they're still trying. And you have to, honestly, in this league until you have a guy that you can believe in. I'm glad that they didn't overthink it at number 3, and they took the player that, like you said, has Micah Parsons comps. Take that player at number 3 overall. I like that they drafted Darius Alexander. I think certainly with Abdul Carter now in the mix there, that's one hell of a defensive line that you have in New York. Love Cam Skattebo in this spot. I think the smash and dash 1 and 2 combo with him and Tyrone Tracy, I think is going to be excellent for this team. I think that Marcus Bowe could be an excellent center in the NFL. I don't know if he's going to play tackle. I don't know if he's got the anchor to be able to play tackle one-on-one on an island in the league, but man, I think he could be excellent as a center. And then you look at the 2 guys that they drafted later in the draft as well, Thomas Finoni and Corey Black. I think that both of these guys are great depth players, good special teams players, good athletes to bet on. So I really did like this class, and I agree with you. It's a little bit of a hedge. You say an A-. I'd probably give it somewhere around like a B, B+, because I like every other pick. Other than the Jackson Dart one, I'm a little wary on it just because I didn't love him overall as a quarterback prospect. But I can at least get it. I can understand why the pick was made. And so probably getting like a B+ from me. If you love Jackson Dart, like you said, it's probably an AA+ because the rest of the draft I thought they navigated very well.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's the funniest part is the one pick that we question is the one that's going to decide the fate of those 2 guys' jobs. So we'll see. The Giants, look, they've been fishing for a quarterback. It didn't work with Daniel Jones. They took maybe a little bit too long to get off the Eli Manning boat. Back in the day, they're having similar issues to the Saints and the Steelers and teams like that. But if that hits, it's going to hit because they've got Skattebo, you got Tyrone Tracy, you've got Malik Neighbors and Wan'Dale Robinson, those guys outside. I think, the offensive line, that's the only thing I would say, too. Bo is kind of that ball of clay that I wouldn't start on the offensive line right away. Maybe could have gone offensive line earlier, but this draft is eventually going to be judged by Jackson Dart and his performance.
Let's go to the Eagles next. In the first round, they traded up 1 spot to get the sliding Jihad Campbell, though after the draft, Howie Roseman even said, we tried to trade up even higher than this to go get him as he started to go down the board. He had that shoulder injury that he has had surgery on, and if he's good to go, man, what a 1-2 combo in the middle he and Zach Bond can be for Philadelphia. In the second round, they took Andrew Makuba, the safety from Texas. 4th round, Ty Robinson. 5th round, they had 3 picks. Quarterback Mac McWilliams, linebacker Smael Monda Jr., and then center Drew Kendall. 6th round, 3 picks as well. Miles Hinton, the offensive tackle from Michigan. Cam Williams, the offensive tackle from Texas. And then Antoine Powell-Ryland, the edge rusher from Virginia Tech. Our staff gave this one an A. It felt very Philadelphia-esque. I think that you can see impact players throughout this entire draft class, and the kind of bets that were made later in the draft, you look at and you go, damn, Philly's got a chance to develop these dudes into some studs with the coaching staff that they have and their track record over the last couple of years. What did you think of Philly? We gave them an A. What did you think of their draft?
It's fantastic once again. I think did I see on one of our PFF Twitter handles that this is the 4th straight year we've given the Eagles draft something in the A range, at least an A-. I think it's the 4th straight year, and I mean it just goes to show you why they've been in 2 of the last 3 Super Bowls. They won it last year. Obviously, they were clearly the best team in football because even the guys that just fall to them naturally in these drafts, perfect fits for their team. I mean, we don't know what Nakobe Dean's situation is at linebacker, but at this point, now you have Jihad Campbell to go with Zach Bond. That's incredible stuff. I mean, and you talk about the key to Vic Fangio's defense is being able to stay in those 2 high looks and stop the run with 6 in the box. You're going to be able to do that with Jihad Campbell now, next to Bond in that great D-line. Andrew Makuba, I know you're a big Sidney Brown guy, but I think Makuba has every reason to think he can compete for a starting spot alongside Brown, and you'll see both of them play, obviously, at some point. Ty Robinson, really good athlete, I think fits in, especially when they reduce down to 5-man looks. Smael Mondon is, obviously the Georgia Bulldog. They had to take 1 in this draft eventually. And then, to me, I love their last 2 picks in this draft. Max Chadwick was talking about Cameron Williams being really a 3rd or 4th round player that they got in the 6 rounds, got to develop as a pass rusher, but get him into Stoutland U down there, and he's going to have no issue eventually. That's the perfect developmental tackle to have. And then, as if this team didn't have enough pass rushers, rushers. I'm in love with Antoine Powell-Ryland. I think for 20 to 25 snaps a game, if that, I think that role that they were looking for Bryce Huff to give them last year, even though they paid him a lot, but really is a situational pass rusher, I think Antoine Powell-Ryland could do that. Jalix Hunt did it coming from the FCS level last year. I think Powell-Ryland at Virginia Tech, one of the most productive pass rushers over the last couple years there. 14, I believe it was 14 sacks this past year. He's just a really darn good pass rusher, and even if he gives you nothing in run defense, they have enough other guys for that. They can just throw him out there 20 snaps a game and just keep that four-man rush going without blitzing. They didn't blitz a single time in the Super Bowl, and it sure looks like they're not going to have to a whole lot this year either.
All it takes is and I understand this is much easier said than done, but all it takes is 2 elite draft classes back to back for you to just set up your team exactly the way that you need to, especially if you draft those. If you in those 2 drafts, you are heavily hitting these primary positions that have a lot of positional value. Because when you look at their offensive line, obviously it's one of the best in the NFL. Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, Tyler Steen, who was just stepping in for Mekhi Becton, and then Lane Johnson. And then behind them, they traded for Kenyon Green, who's a former first-round pick. And look, he hasn't played anything like a first-round pick, but you take a flyer on him, so you trade for a guy like that. You already have Trevor Keegan there from the Michigan program, and now you're taking a chance on Cam Williams and Miles Hinton. Also, they signed Holland Pierce as a UDFA as well. So it's I love what the Philadelphia Eagles do on the offensive line every single year, because they take these flyers on these players who could just be absolute gold for them. And I wonder why these other teams don't do it. And the reason why these other teams don't do it is because they have to be more wary of the weaknesses of these players. The Eagles don't. The Eagles don't have to look at Cam Williams and say, yeah, I mean, he's not the pass protector he needs to be. The footwork is too heavy. Ton of penalties last season. All they look at is massive offensive tackle, very gifted in how he moves for his size. We'll figure out the rest. We'll see what he's like once we get him in camp. And it's the same thing with Miles Hinton, too. Chris Hinton's son, former All-Pro offensive tackle, just a guy who is built like he's in a lab to play offensive tackle at the NFL level. He just didn't really have great anticipation. The feet looked heavy there for him. He wasn't the mauler that you would think that a player of his size would be. And so it's all right, yeah, you gotta, if you're any other team, you got to think about the weaknesses there, because you're probably talking about a guy who has to be depth for you. Philly doesn't need that. Philly does not need you to be a depth player. They're just taking a bet on these guys and seeing if their athletic potential can win out. So love this draft from Philly. I think that they not only have a great they not only a great finger on the pulse of what makes a great prospect, but also understand their identity and where their roster is very, very well. That's why Howie Roseman is one of the best at this. I like the Mac McWilliams pick as well. It's kind of funny, seeing his name as the 4th one off the board, and then you have Drew Kendall, Cameron Williams, Smile London, Antoine Powell-Ryland, who I could have made arguments that maybe all of those guys would go in front of Mac McWilliams, but somebody who plays very feisty. I think he can play inside now. A little bit more of a slender build for a corner, but I love his attitude. I love his competitiveness. I think he's going to be great in that cornerback room. Anything else on Philly before we move on to the Commanders?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. Philly right now is the best draft and develop team in the league, and I think it shows with a lot of these day 3 picks that they made, that even if they develop into role players like Powell-Ryland, like McWilliams, like Smile Munden, they continue to hit the nail on the head here. I mean, it's just so good the way that they can take these athletes, take guys with flaws like you mentioned, and work to their strengths and work around that. Maybe even a guy like Cameron Williams, maybe they feel like he can move inside eventually, maybe play that right guard spot long term where it's kind of open right now. So they just do a great job of acquiring talent and developing it the right way in the building.
Shopping Cart in the chat says, being friends with an Eagles fan has never been worse. It's true. Probably gets worse every year, to be honest with you, for how well they draft and how good of a team they are. NFL SE's draft coverage is brought to you by our friends over at Jack Link's Duo. Jack Link's knows that there's nothing like a great duo. That's why they have created the new Jack Link's Duo product. What they do is they take 2 different flavors of beef jerky, put it in one bag for you to enjoy right there. They also know that the NFL draft brings together some great dream duos. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase was a dream duo at LSU. Now it's the same with the Cincinnati Bengals. Guys in the same position, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua. That's a wide receiver dream duo that was formed via the NFL draft. How about one that we just talked about? A linebacker dream duo in Zach Bond and Jahad Campbell for the Philadelphia Eagles. What a incredible second level pairing this would be for Philadelphia if Jihad Campbell's shoulder gets back to fully healthy, because insane season that Zach Bone had last year, gets a big contract this offseason because of it. And it's funny, for years we were all told Howie doesn't draft linebackers. The Eagles will never draft a linebacker. They'll never prioritize linebacker. And the thing is, they prioritize linebacker when it was appropriate for the rest of the roster. It's not that they think the position isn't worth it. And this is sort of the same conversation with running back, right? It's not that the position is worthless. You've just got to have your ducks in a row at different parts of the roster, specifically at trenches and at quarterback, before you start looking at major investments with high premium picks at those positions. The Eagles are in a great spot, and that's why Campbell and Bond are an absolute dream duo. Jack Link's got a handful of their own dream duos. Mango and jalapeno in the same bag. Original and teriyaki. Buffalo and ranch is one of their flavor combinations. You can find Jack Link's duos wherever you get Jack Link's beef jerky, select convenience stores, or select Walmarts as well. Let's go to the Commanders next. Talk about what feels like your Washington Commanders after you being such a big Jaden Daniels guy. It's like your second favorite team after the Jets. Maybe it's your favorite team because the Jets, cause you a lot of pain and anguish. Anyways, we gave the Commanders a B+ for drafting Josh Connerly Jr. in the first round, Trey Amos in the second, Jalen Lane in the fourth, no third-round pick, remember. Sixth round, Kane Medrano, and then seventh round, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. A smaller draft haul here for the Commanders, but we gave him a B+. What'd you think for the Commanders here this year?
Yeah, I think obviously it's got to be looked at in the context of giving up draft capital to get an absolute monster at left tackle in Laramie Tunsil, and then getting Deebo Samuel, who I think gives him another after-the-catch dimension they didn't have enough of last year. And then you look at the draft class, 22nd in pass blocking grade, 30th in coverage grade. I think it's smart to address those two things with the first two picks if they couldn't trade down. I like Josh Connerly a lot. I had him OT4 in this draft. I think he's got good footwork. He's a smooth pass protector, and I assume they're going to let him compete for the starting right tackle job because nobody's moving Tunsil off the left side, and they've got their offensive line's a little bit in flux right now with Sam Cosmi's injury. Maybe Andrew Wiley moves inside. Brendan Coleman's got the flexibility to move inside. They've got options there on an offensive line, but I think Connerly I would expect to compete for that right tackle job, especially if he's ready right now in pass protection like I think he is. And then Trey Amos, that's a steal. That's a steal that they got him late in the second round. He's a guy we thought they could have taken at 29, and I think if you think about Amos and the fact that if he does get this starting job on the outside across from Marshawn Lattimore, the big thing there is moving Mike Sainristil back into the slot, which is his more natural position. He did a nice job on the outside adjusting. He's one of the most competitive players on the team that they have. But if you can get Sainristil back in the slot and this Amos pick works, it actually changes the complexion, I think, of your entire defense, certainly your secondary. So I think they got two really good players there. And then their third pick, Jalen Lane in the fourth round. This is someone I was looking at that I think his production in the NFL could surpass his production in college. He had very, very high separation scores, very high yards after the catch scores. His total production as far as yardage at Virginia Tech wasn't great, but that's really due to Virginia Tech's quarterback situation. Just not a whole lot of accurate passes thrown his way, but he's a dangerous player with a lot of speed. Early on is going to get some return work, especially as a punt returner. And then I think in the same vein of, okay, they got Deebo Samuel for yards after catch, that's what they got Jalen Lane for. He's got home run speed, find a way to get the ball in his hands. I think especially in screens and gadget plays, things like that in Cliff Kingsbury's offense, I think Jalen Lane could be a very dangerous piece for him down the line.
I like this draft. I really did. I wasn't as high on some other people, as high as some other people were on Josh Connerly Jr., but he was 30th on my board. They take him, what was it, 30th overall, 29th overall, whatever it was. So it's like right there. The value was right there. I think it's appropriate. I'm very interested to see how their offensive line is going to work out with Brandon Coleman and obviously Sam Cosmi getting hurt late last year. They have Andrew Wiley as well, but he is on the last year of his contract. What's the short and the long-term plan here? Like, are they going to play Connerly at right guard while Sam Cosmi is hurt and probably rehabbing most of the regular season? If that's the case, are they planning to kick him out to right tackle? If that's the case, what are you doing with Brandon Coleman? Do you want Brandon Coleman to play on that right side of the line of scrimmage? Would you rather him play on the left and just sort of be behind Laramie Tunsil? What's sort of your decision there on that offensive line? But at least they're getting ahead of the need. I think they were attacking it the way that they needed to with that kind of priority, knowing that Cosme, one of their best offensive linemen, is going to be out for most of the regular season. So they're making sure they're good to go in the short and the long term. So I like that plan there. I do agree with you completely. Trey Amos, big time steal for me. Somebody who I think is a starting outside corner in this league. Gives you a lot of flexibility with Mike Sanderson, who is clearly just a baller from what we saw last season. Jalen Lane, again, I wasn't as high on Jalen Lane as some other people were. However, for this team specifically, they've got their starting wide receivers in Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel. And then it's sort of like Noah Brown's in there, Jalen Lane's in there, Luke McCaffrey's in there. Like, who is going to emerge there as that consistent wide receiver 3? And then it'll probably also be situational with them. So I think that makes sense there, especially with a 4th-round selection. And then Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt is somebody who they needed to get more dynamic at the running back spot. And we even sometimes mocked them Amari and Hampton, like in the 1st round. That was sometimes the priority when we were creating these draft hauls for the Commanders. But they end up waiting all the way until the 7th round. I do think that they got a really good one, though. Somebody who can complement the guys who are already in that room. Somebody who brings a lot of dynamic ability to them. To be honest with you, fresh legs. I know he's probably pissed off about it because he didn't get to play a lot this past season. He only got to play one game because the NCAA ruled him ineligible. It's kind of a long story. From his very first year of college football, he was wearing a number, and then he redshirted. And because he redshirted, they gave that number to somebody else. And then that player played the whole season under that number. So the NCAA said, no, this was your number at the beginning of the season, and we have snaps for this player who played this number. And Ja'Cory was like, that wasn't me. I redshirted. I gave it to somebody else. The NCAA was like, nah, we've already made our decision. Too late. So he didn't really get to play a lot this year, but fresh legs because of it. So he might be able to hit the ground running when it comes to training camp. So I do like what the Commanders did, even though it was a smaller class overall.
Yeah, the one rule the NCAA actually enforces, right, in the times that we're living in. That feels a little odd. But the other thing on Andrew Wiley and the offensive line shifting we were talking about is, and I forgot about this, his first 3 years in Kansas City, now this goes all the way back to 2020, he was primarily a guard. So I do think there is a world if Connerly shows them enough that he can start at right tackle, I could see Wiley filling in that right guard spot while Connerly is there at tackle because he at least has experience doing it. I don't think Connerly has any experience at guard in college, so that might work in his favor also if he's trying to win that right tackle job.
Cowboys, the last team that we're going with here, we're talking about today in the 1st round at number 12 overall. They took guard Tyler Booker. 2nd round, they got a big steal, in my opinion, with edge rusher Donovan Ezeraku. Sabone Ravel was their pick at cornerback in the 3rd round. 5th rounder, they had a pair of guys, running back Jaden Blue, linebacker Shamar James. 6th round, Ajani Cornelius, the offensive tackle from Oregon. 7th round, Jay Toya, the defensive tackle from UCLA. Running back Phil Maffa from Clemson. And then Tommy Aking Bisotti, the defensive tackle from Maryland. What'd you think about this one? The PFF staff gave this one an A+. So if this wasn't the highest grade that we gave, it was tied for the highest. It was one of the two. Obviously, you can't get any better than this. So we gave this an A+. What do you think about that for Dallas?
I'll tell you what, after night one, we weren't thinking they were going to get an A+, because you and I both thought Tyler Booker was a little rich, but then you turn around and you get Donovan Ezeraku, who I think finished number 16 on your big board. You get him at 44, and Siobhan Revel's a steal in the 3rd round. You got to give him that much, too. I was surprised that he fell that far, and for him to get here to Dallas where he can still recover from the knee injury, you've got Trayvon Diggs and Deron Bland already there on the outside, and I think you got a lot of options when it comes to, bringing Revel along slowly and then working him into the system. But no, you have to really like this class. Look, Booker's going to start for him right away. I think Ezeraku has a very good chance to start for him off the other edge spot right away. I know they have Marshawn Neeland, who they drafted last year. I think, did they bring back, was it Dante Fowler Jr. they brought back?
I think they did, yes.
I think it was Fowler. There was another veteran that they brought back, but I think Ezeraku could compete for a lot of snaps off the edge. I think Revel for now is great depth to have, and then eventually could be a starter. And I'll tell you the other one, I love Jaden Blue. as the speed element in his backfield that they just didn't have. They have Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders. They got Phil Maffa later, who's also not a speed guy. Jaden Blue, I think, fits right in when you talk about a pass catcher, a speed back, one of those scat backs who can add that change of pace to your offense. And then I think as a developmental pick, and I know he doesn't have maybe the highest ceiling, I think Ajani Cornelius in the 6 was a really good pick for them. I think they've got some issues at right tackle with Terrence Steele, and he's very expensive, hasn't played up to his contract. And I think Cornelius is a guy, whether it's as a right tackle or maybe even move him inside, because I think Brian Schottenheimer is going to go to more. He's more of a gap scheme guy usually. I know he's kind of transitioned to a little more zone lately, especially in Seattle, but his background in running, those power schemes, those gap schemes, and getting Cornelius, I think, in that sort of scheme, especially somewhere on the right side of the offensive line, could help them down the line. I think that's a really good depth pick on the offensive line, and it's something that it's clear that they wanted to, in this draft, when you look at it on the whole. Ezra Raku, even though he's a great pass rusher, also a good run defender. Booker brings size inside. Shamar James at linebacker, run stopper. Jay Toya or Ajani Cornelius now is finally the part of the offseason where they got to, okay, we do have to run and stop the run, because I don't think they did a great job of it in free agency, and that was their 2 biggest problems last year. Running back is still going to be a question. They're kind of holding it together, and Jaden Blue's a good change of pace, but I think the Cowboys did do a really good job here, at least raising the floor on those 2 things, especially in the trenches.
Yeah, I think this was a draft that was heavily emphasized in getting stronger up front on both sides of the ball. Jay Toya is a good depth addition. I agree. Cornelius is as well. Akeem Bisoti is too along the defensive line. And I think that Revel's a really good bet to make at the cornerback spot. Not knowing maybe what the long-term feel is for the guys that are currently in that group. I think that they're hoping that Deron Bland's going to be there for a long time. Trayvon Diggs, of course, but he's gone through some injuries himself. So you're getting some insurance out there as an outside corner. You're also giving Revel a little bit of time to make sure that his knee is good to go, coming off of that knee injury that he suffered last year. I agree. It is a funny class, and we talked about this already when we went over the draft recap show. When you look at the Dallas Cowboys, it's a classic example of why you can't totally judge a draft class after night 1, right? You can't just sit here and be like, man, I don't know what the Cowboys are doing, because when you take a step back after day 2 and you go, Tyler Booker, Donovan Ezraku, Savone Revel, pretty good to me. If you would have just switched where Ezraku and Tyler Booker were at, I would have said, man, no question about it, one of my favorite drafts, and that's why I think for how they brought all those guys together, you still have to have that sentiment. So the Cowboys, very good in this draft. It's not always a guarantee. Sometimes the Cowboys are one of those teams that sort of go their own way, and they go against consensus, and they kind of have their way about things and what they think of certain players. But in my opinion, it was very close to the value that I had on the big board for a lot of these players. I thought they attacked the areas they needed to. I agree with you. I think that Jaden Blue I was very surprised that Jaden Blue even declared, because he never was really a full-time starting back in college football, but he very clearly had an NFL mindset to him. He always wanted to go to the league, and instead now he was sitting there making his decision saying, all right, well, at least I have good experience. Teams have seen what I can be as a receiver out of the backfield. They've seen my long speed, and I just don't have a lot of mileage on me. I don't have a lot of hits. And so I guess that's sort of the decision that he came to, and I think that he landed in a really good spot here in Dallas. So I agree, very, very good class here for the Dallas Cowboys.
I think on Jaden Blue also, you mentioned, okay, if he was going to go back to college, would he be the starter? Probably not, because Texas is going to get C.J. Baxter.
Not at Texas. Yeah, not at Texas. He would have had to transfer.
They're going to get C.J. Baxter back, and even if he stayed at Texas, he wouldn't have started ahead of Baxter. He's just built more like a classic back. We'll talk about C.J. Baxter going into next year. Certainly there's a whole lot of 2026 noise already happening on social media, but we'll get into that later. I know neither one of us is ready to get head first into that conversation, but no, I think it's a fantastic pick. I think you're going to see Blue in there a lot for Dak Prescott on passing downs especially.
Appreciate everybody getting in the show as it is live. If you could like the video, we would really appreciate it. That would really help us out. Also, if you're watching and you're not subscribed to the channel, please do so. We're going to have, we got one more Draft Grades episode here for you guys. Dalton teased it a little bit. We're going to be getting to 2026 at some point. We're obviously going to have a lot of previews when it comes to fantasy football and how these teams are going to do, some rookie performances, all that good stuff throughout the summer. So if you're not subscribed to the channel, please do so. Again, if you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, now is a great time to get one. 25% off a year yearly subscription over at PFF, which gets you the premium stats. It gets you the fantasy football tools. It gets you all the great betting tools and some new ones that we haven't even released yet that we're going to have for this season, which we are very, very excited about. But you won't be able to get 25% off when those release. You can get 25% off right now if you use that promo code DRAFT25. So DRAFT25 gets you that 25% off a year-long subscription over at PFF.com. We've got the AFC and the NFC West to close things out. The draft grades for all 8 of those teams coming to you tomorrow at 10 a.m. For Dalton Wasserman, I'm Trevor Sikkema saying again, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.